Hello, welcome back to my channel. So, Sebastián from Apocalypse Reading actually suggested one thing to me when I talked to him about the state of my bookish videos. He was here in Malaysia last year. Basically, I've not made plenty of videos in 2025, especially at the end, but I have been reading a lot, and I was at that point in which I was not able to keep up with my own reading. I was more of a sluggish booktuber than a sluggish reader at that time. But worry not, I'm still a slow reader, so that is still true. I'm still me, but I was even I was an even slower booktuber or YouTuber or video uploader, and the last video before my previous video, which was the first video in 2026, right? I have been trying to do this kind of like series of catch-up wrap-up, and I think I stopped until number 4. So that meant in total of 12 books that I talked about, and I realized that I could not keep up. If I were to continue doing that catch-up wrap-up, I would probably be doing like at least 9 more. And to be honest, some of those books that I read last year were not exactly books that I consider to be really memorable. Like, yeah, I would definitely want to talk about them while the memory of them was still fresh in my head, but it has been months now, and I don't even know if I can remember those books. So I decided to start anew. Basically, that was Sebastian's suggestion. So this is what I'm doing, but I will still be talking about the books that really struck me in that period. I had a bunch of 5-star books that I would be really excited to talk about, but I'll do that in a future videos. Not just 5 stars perhaps, but maybe there are some like less than 5 stars, 4 stars, 3-star reads that I thought was memorable. I would probably mention them in future videos, like maybe do some dedicated videos for those books. But probably I won't be talking about all of the books that I finished in 2025. So it's 2026, I'm focusing on new things going forward. So in this video I'll be talking about 2 books. I actually finished 4, excluding the ones that I talked in my previous video. So 7 books in total, but only 2 in this video because I don't know if my phone is going to have no chill again this time. It might cut off the recording just like what it did, what happened in that first, previous video. And both of the books that I want to talk about in this video are translated fiction and also 5 stars. The first one that I want to talk about is this. This is by Kwon Yeo-sun. It's called Lemon. It was originally written in Korean, translated to English by Janet Hong. So this book was originally published in Korean in 2019. It is a slim book, so if you hear that within 18 days of this year I've already read like 7 books, it's because many of those books are like short books. So nothing surprising there. I'm still slow. But anyway, Lemon was a pleasant surprise for me. I picked this up also around the time when I was feeling like a little bit down at the beginning of the year. I was stressed. And I did not expect anything from this book other than the fact that maybe it could be a quick read because it's short, and the writing is also kind of sparse. So that was my expectation in this book. So when I finally finished this book and realized how much I enjoyed the writing, I felt happy. Yes, I was happy. So what is Lemon about? This novel centers around the murder of a young woman, an 18-year-old woman named Kim Hye-on. So basically what happened is that Kim Hye-on has been killed, and while the police was investigating that case, they interrogated two of her classmates, but because their investigation yielded nothing conclusive in terms of revealing who the perpetrator was, the case just went cold and it just simply went unsolved. And so this novel just kind of explores the impact of that case on three different characters. So the first character is named Daon, Kim Daon. So Daon is Hye-on's younger sister, and obviously it makes sense to expect that her younger sister would be very much affected by grief due to the murder of her older sister. And on top of that, there's the fact that the murder investigation has been inconclusive, and so there is no sense of closure for Daon. And so she ends up manifesting her the way that she coped with this grief in certain ways. And not only that, her mom also expresses her grief in her own way. And the other two characters, which are who are the other two point of view characters in this book, are Hye-on's former classmates. So one of them is named Taerim. So Taerim, her section has some kind of I would say interesting tones to them. Basically, she is very much affected by this murder case because of reasons that I would not reveal, but one can really see that, through the point of view of this character, this murder case really affected her. And because this book sort of examined the effects of this murder on these three different characters over a period of a few years, we can also see that with as far as Taerim goes, this character, she is also affected by this case in such an intense way that it seems to become a baggage to her in her life. And so the third character is named Sang-hui, and Sang-hui, she's also the former classmate of Hye-on, but her proximity to Hye-on and Hye-on's murder is a little bit far compared to the previous two characters. And so her point of view that is presented in this book feels, I would say, closer to a reader's point of view, the reader of this novel. There's a bit of that sense of detachment between Sang-hui and also what goes on around the murder and also the investigation and all that. And it feels as if that when reading her section, there's this sense that you're viewing this case as if it is a kind of spectacle. And I would say this, as a result, because we have these three different points of view onto this event that had occurred many years prior, we end up with this narrative that is quite rich in layers, and also rich in perspectives. And I really like how those different perspectives just kind of like bounce off each other. And what I really also enjoy about this is that this book kind of explores the interplay between different themes. So you get themes of class being touched upon, and you also get the themes of, for example, physical beauty and how it relates to spectacle, and also the gaze by the society, and also the expectation by the society, and how that just sort of influences these characters' perception on that event, and also how they respond to it. So honestly, I think for such a small book, it is quite rich and quite punchy. I thought that's really wonderful. So that's why I gave this one 5 stars. I feel like this book, I often saw this book being marketed as some kind of a crime or mystery book, which I think might be a little bit misleading, because the way that it is written, I think it would probably be more towards general or literary fiction. I feel like the readers who could appreciate this novel more would probably be readers of literary fiction, because of I would say, the writing style that is involved here, and the kind of direction that this story takes. Like, there is an element in this novel that is kind of resembles a whodunit, but it is also not the core of this novel, if you know what I mean. So if you enjoy something that I would say something like a psychological novel, psychological fiction, I think you might appreciate this book. Anyway, I'm going to talk about the next book, the second one, although I hope that my phone is not going to stop recording, because it just showed a warning. So the second book I want to talk about is called Karitas Untitled. I'm probably going to put the picture here. Karitas Untitled, written by Kristín Marja Baldursdóttir. This book was originally written in Icelandic, translated to English by Roughton. I borrowed this book from the National Library, and that's why I don't have it right now, because I just returned it yesterday. I returned it yesterday. But this book was also quite a pleasant surprise. This novel is about the life of a young woman named Karitas. So the story is set in around 1920s all the way until late 1930s in Iceland. And basically at the time, the context was that women are starting to they were going to be able to vote. So things were progressing for women in Iceland at the time, and that just kind of sets the tone of the story. You can already expect that this novel is going to be centered around women's experience. And so the protagonist, Karitas, she grew up in a poor family, and this poverty just sort of defines who she is as a person at the beginning of her life. But Karitas is also someone who has shown talents in the arts and drawing, and so she's an aspiring artist. But because of the setting that she finds herself in, the setting of this novel, which is like, Iceland in the early 20th century, she doesn't really have much opportunity in order for her to pursue a life as an artist. And even if she does have the opportunity, she may not be able to be taken seriously by people around her due to the fact that not only she's a woman, but at the same time, the society that she lives in also has some really strong expectation on what a woman should be or what a woman should do. So yeah, basically that is the core of this novel. It kind of follows Karitas as she grows up and as she is trying to pursue, her ambition to become an artist, a painter, while at the same time trying to fight against what society is trying to tell her to do, with respect to things like jobs, like the kind of jobs that she could have, marriage, and also the expectations on women regarding domestic life. Now, one of the things that I really like about this book is that there are a few things. Okay, one of them is that you have a character whose main thing is being an artist. So there is already this kind of character who leans towards the artistic, right? I feel like it felt really refreshing to read about this character, with her ambition not treated as something that is kind of whimsical. You don't really get with this book, you don't really get a narrative that is intended to make you feel good about this woman's journey, but rather much of it actually feels kind of gritty, and you can sense, like, it's really tangible of the discomfort that Karitas experienced growing up in poverty, and also eventually later with her life as an adult, as a woman in her community, and the kind of difficulties that she had to endure. And these are all written in a very realistic way, and it doesn't really shy away from some of the, I would say, harsher reality. It doesn't get too graphic, but there were certain moments that could feel quite uncomfortable. And at the same time, it doesn't stray away from Karitas having this kind of artistic mind. That is still there. And you end up with a story that is able to kind of portray her ambition, and also the resistance to that ambition in a kind of like tug of war of sorts. So that's one of the things that I like. Another thing that I also enjoy, and I feel like this is kind of related to that whole subversion of the whimsy, I would say, is that this book features tons, and I mean tons, of nature, and one can even say that characters in this book, their actions or their motivations are partly driven by the fact that they live in an area where the natural world can be quite harsh. We're talking about like really cold winters, and then the terrains, the landscape, and also the really raging harsh seas, right? So nature in this book feels like such an imposing presence, and you can really feel that the characters, especially when it comes to the gender's expectation of this society, of Iceland at the time, has something to do with nature. Okay, so I just got cut off. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, about the nature's relationship with the society's gender roles, right? You could see that there is some kind of relationship with that, but as time passes and the world became more modern, some of these gender roles became antiquated. But you could also see in this book that the attitude surrounding gender roles is still persists, and is one thing that has kind of like become an obstacle in Karitas' personal journey into wanting to become an accomplished painter. Nature is portrayed as something that is very, very strong, and it is one of those books that you could really feel nature is there as if it is its own entity. Nature consisting of the climate, the mountains, terrain, seas, and all that, as if it is like one of those novels where nature feels like it is the thing that kind of bears witness to whatever that is going on with the human characters at the time, and nature is just doing its own thing, like being really imposing and all that. And at some point in this novel, nature is even being used by the characters to just sort of it is used as some kind of literary device in order to kind of nudge the direction of Karitas as the main character, as a protagonist, not only in this book but also in her life. So that part I find kind of interesting. Another part, which is also again related to that whole idea of the whimsy, right? Elves are also an element in this book. It's not frequently mentioned, but at some parts of this book, the involvement of elves as an element in the story becomes strong, and you could really sense that elves and the beliefs in elves, especially by the characters in this book, sort of makes it feel like it is part of the setting. It is part of the geographical landscape, the nature where the story takes place in. And in relation to that, so we have things that are related to the supernatural, right? Elves. They are written as if they're not really supernatural, as if they're like the realistic part of the character's journey. But at the same time, it also, for me, in my opinion, doesn't really count as magical realism, because the other characters don't seem to show this kind of interaction with the appearances of the supernatural, probably adjacent elves. Basically, I would say the only interaction that I could remember is between the elves and the Karitas, which brings us to another point that I find is kind of interesting about this book, and how it kind of relates the women's experience with what is usually considered as madness. So in the first chapter of this book, one of the side characters actually shows signs of hysterics, and I would say this very, very broad term of madness would pop up here and there in this book with some characters, but that also includes Karitas as she's the main character. She also experiences some kind of again, madness, for lack of better term, I would say. But as readers, because we are able to really know who Karitas is as a character, we can see that her madness feels very sensible. There is something rational behind it. that it makes her character feels even more complex and layered. Like, Karitas is not just a character that we want to root for simply because she's you know, all of these really nice things. Like, she's not a Marisu character. You could really sense that Karitas has some personal weaknesses that she has to overcome in order for her to become a better version of a person. So you can definitely see all of these complexities and layers with this character. And that also includes these episodes of potential madness, which honestly makes her feel even more sympathetic. But not just, you know, she's not the only character who is affected by this, but also other female characters as well. And this is one of the aspects that I find really fascinating, because throughout, you know, the world, madness is often associated with female characters. And I would say, you know, because I've not read a lot of books from Iceland, it was kind of interesting to see this popping up, this concept popping up in the book originally written in Icelandic as well, about characters living in Iceland. So yeah, basically that's just kind of like a really fascinating concept to me. And, you know, just to see the universality of that, it feels, you know, it feels very interesting. So, I guess that's all. I'm gonna talk about Karitas Untitled. I don't think my phone is going to allow me to record for much longer, so I'm going to end this video before it cuts the recording again. It just happened earlier, and when that happened, I was scrambling to find what I could get rid of from my phone, because my phone is heavy right now. And I'll return to you guys in another video soon for 2 more books. So yeah, take care. Thanks for watching, or thanks for listening. I would say thanks for listening, because I don't think you have much to see. It's just me, and, you know, I'm not really that interesting to look at. But I'll see you guys again. Bye.